Welcome to Big Sexy Chat. This is Crystal. My lovely co-host is Merf. Merf, how's everything, Merf?
Oh, things are great. I'm super excited about today, and I've had a good weekend, so I'm just like ready to roll into it and
All
just talk
right.
about all this fun stuff.
We are so grateful for our community. Thank you all so much for all of the reviews and all of the love and all the listens. So love y'all. We really do. And we do this, even if just one person loves it, that's enough for us. If it helps one person, that's enough. It's enough for me.
Yeah, it really is.
Absolutely. That's the main goal. Main goal here. If you want to help us out, you can buy us a coffee for $3 on our website. We have a little link that says, here's where you can tip us. And of course, we always love like, shares, and reviews, right? Is that how we say it, Murph?
Like, share, review, comment.
Comment. Okay, cool. Very cool. I'm really excited today because we have a really special guest. And I think that the topic is really timely because we're coming upon all those lovely holidays where we get to hear from our families about how much they actually think about fat people. Like sometimes at the holidays, the truth comes out. People are drinking a little and they might get a little more like, yeah. Are you sure you need a second helping of dessert? I do actually. Thank you very much. That's how I would say it. Or maybe not. I like to curse a lot. I have I have a mouth of a sailor. So yeah, I'd probably tell them to fuck off. But anyway, we're going to learn some strategies and some techniques from the very most amazing Ragen Chastain. And if you want to follow an amazing, I'll call it a newsletter, but it's called a Substack. But Ragen's website is weightandhealthcare.com. Welcome, Ragen Chastain. So happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Congrats to you on all the followers, and congrats to them for following such a great podcast. I'm super duper excited about this today.
Thank you. We just know we know how necessary it is. I know you know as well. And yeah, we get such great feedback. It's like, it's heartwarming. Just like when I was at Curvy Girl, when I had my store, people would just thank you. It feels good to feel like you're helping somebody, of course, and especially someone I consider to be part of my fat community. And I guess that's the other thing we're here to do, is to kind of create more community, or like enrich the community that we already are all a part of. And we hope it does that. And we do kind of keep it sexy, but this episode is probably not going to be as sexy as most of our episodes, but we think this is very important. Just like our talk with Tigress about hysterectomies, not so sexy, but we get so much feedback about that particular podcast because we talk about our fat hysterectomies and how they were similar and how they were different, and how we both had an amazing recovery. And our doctors were like, no big deal. Yes, let's do this hysterectomy. And Tigress and I both kind of had an experience where we're like, hey, but we're fat. Like, we're waiting for our anesthesiologist to say something. And like, I think Tigress's anesthesiologist said, you think you're the first fat woman I've done a hysterectomy on? Like, same here. I mean, I asked my anesthesiologist, you're not going to lecture me? She goes, no, it's my job to keep you alive. That's all I do. I'm like, okay, let's just do that. I like that job. So anyway, yeah, it gets to be a little rough out there. So it's nice when you can tune into a podcast. And thankfully there's lots of fat focused podcasts these days too. I love it. And Ragen, the Substacks kind of have like a little voice thing now as well, right? Not just written letters.
Yeah, so I've just started, they just launched, and I've started doing the voiceovers for each episode. And then eventually I'll collect them all and create like essentially a kind of a quote unquote podcast of just me rereading the pieces that I've written. So that's exciting.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're really excited. We're going to turn the floor over to you. We want to hear all about your dealing with family and friends and the fatphobia at the holidays. And I'm going to say this too. Whatever you learn today, you can also apply to when you have to go to a family birthday, a family barbecue. These are skills that are going to work anytime that you have to, or you are with your family and they're fatphobic. So, all right, Ragen, it's all yours, and we'll ask our questions if you have any as they come up.
Yeah, feel free to jump in there. I'll get going. So as she said, my name's Ragen Chastain. My email is ragen@danceswithfat.org. And you are very welcome to email me if you have questions about this, if you want follow-up, etc. I want to start and just talk a little bit about privilege before we get too far into this, because the privilege comes to bear in all of these kind of interactions. And there's cultural privilege, and that is, of course, the opportunities we receive, as well as the difficulties we don't face when we live in a dominant rather than a marginalized identity. I have a lot of privilege as a white person, cisgender, currently able-bodied, currently neurotypical. And so I'm also marginalized as a fat person, a queer person, and a woman. And one of the things that privilege does is it puts us in a situation where we don't know what we don't know, because we're not having the experiences of people who have marginalizations that are different than us. So obviously it's our responsibility to proactively learn, to reach out, to listen, to hear, and to learn how people want us to use our privilege to dismantle it. And I do work hard to do that. And I also make mistakes and fall short. And so I'm always open to being called in or out on that. But this can also mean that we don't understand why somebody chooses a different way to deal with friends and family fat phobia than we might. There's also personality privilege. Whenever I talk about kind of talking back to fat phobia or having these interactions, I want to be clear. Our culture privileges certain personalities. So I'm the kind of person where conflict doesn't bother me. I become really calm. I become really clear-headed. I have access to all the facts and figures and statistics in my head in a conflict situation. And that's just like privilege and luck of the draw, personality kind of stuff. But because of our culture, I often get treated better in these kind of conflicts than someone who becomes cloudy in their thinking, becomes upset, maybe gets emotional or cries. And it's important to understand all of those are totally valid responses to being treated poorly, to being discriminated against, to experiencing fat phobia. And so the way that I do it isn't better. It's just how I happen to do it, but I do get privileged by our culture. And so I'm going to try to provide a lot of options for people, regardless of what your response to this kind of conflict is, so that you have options that will work for you. I also want to talk really quickly about language. Fat is my personal preferred adjective to describe myself. I like it. It's a reclaiming term for me, kind of a way I tell my bullies they can't have my lunch money anymore. It's also important that it doesn't pathologize or medicalize my body the way the terms that like overweight and obese do. And these are terms that were literally made up to pathologize higher weight bodies, to medicalize those bodies. And overweight is just obviously, it says there's a weight and you're over it, which is not scientific. And then obese comes from a Latin word that means to eat until fat. So way more stereotype than science there. But these have sort of worked their way into medicine and science in ways that make them seem really authoritative. Their origin, including the body mass index, is rooted in and inextricable from racism and anti-Blackness and white supremacy. And I urge you to read or listen to Sabrina String's Fearing the Black Body and Deshaun Harrison's Belly of the Beast to learn more about how these things are not just rooted in racism and anti-Blackness and white supremacy, but continue to disproportionately impact those communities today. The impact of this whole pathologizing of higher weight bodies has been a ton of profit to the weight loss industry, a ton of stigma and oppression to the people who get classified with these words, and then a lot of fractured relationships between higher weight people and food and movement and their bodies and healthcare and their friends and family, which we're going to talk about today. So we're hearing now this idea of person first language, that we should instead say a person with obesity or a person with overweight. And first of all, I feel like fat phobia gives me enough problems without making me grammatically problematic as well. But beyond that, it's important to know this is not coming from fat activism community. It's not coming from weight neutral health community. This is coming from the diet industry, pushing their agenda of conceptualizing simply existing in a higher weight body as a healthcare issue, as what they're calling a chronic lifelong health condition or disease.
Ragen, do you cover this question about overweight? When people use that word, I like to say over which weight.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
I don't. Oh, I'm like, yeah, I don't know either. I'm not sure which weight you're talking about.
Yeah,
It works well. It's a good
exactly.
strategy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because it's just a body shaming term, right? You're the wrong weight. Like, I'm also short, but I'm not like medically under tall. And even for people who are like, for little people, there's a big push against this idea of pathologizing their body size in this way. So this whole person first language thing is being pushed by the diet industry, and they're claiming that it's anti-stigma. And so some really well-meaning people are using this language thinking that it's better, when in fact it's worse because it separates us from our bodies. So first of all, this concept is co-opted from disability community, where it is very controversial. So again, really urge you to read authors from disability community to understand person first language within that community. But for fat people, it's just sort of been co-opted and whole cloth by the diet industry. And it separates us from our bodies. It says that accurately describing our bodies is so terrible that you have to find a semantic workaround. Right. So no one in my life has ever said, oh my gosh, don't call yourself brunette. You're just a person with brown hair. Because obviously we don't think there's anything wrong with me having brown hair, but saying you're a person with overweight, you're a person with obesity. Like we never say, oh, they're a person with thinness, don't call them thin. Right. So again, it ends up being more stigmatizing. So sometimes fat isn't the right word for a lot of reasons. There are people who could be described as fat who don't choose that word to describe themselves. And obviously that's a valid choice. So I might use also higher weight, people of size, larger bodies, basically terms that are accurately describing these bodies without pathologizing or medicalizing them and that weren't used as a schoolyard taunt. And so I'll use fat and those terms, interchangeably. I only use obese and overweight if I'm talking about the literature that they are in, and I never use person first language. So that's a bit about language. And then just a little bit about the holidays. So a lot of people in cultures and religions celebrate holidays during this sort of November through January period. Not everyone celebrates, but not celebrating isn't protection from the fat phobia that the holiday generates. And we'll talk about a lot of reasons why, but a lot of it is that the diet industry really uses this as like a marketing center for them. Right? There's the holidays are coming, then there's New Year's resolutions. This is a big time for them to just like pour out their ads and their social media announcements and such. And so it's important to understand that not celebrating holidays, while again, completely valid, doesn't provide all the protection you could have from dealing with fat phobia at the holidays.
You still have to deal with the new year, new you.
Yes, exactly. So first and foremost, if you're in a situation and you either don't want to or can't reply out loud to some fat phobia that you're experiencing, here's something that you can do to kind of get through it. The first thing is you can acknowledge the situation silently, right? You just think to yourself, oh, here it is. Like, this is fat phobia. And it's important to understand fat phobia can become our problem, but it's not our fault. And that's a critical distinction. That this is happening, it's becoming my problem. I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with it, but it's not my fault. It shouldn't be happening. And creating that space can create some space for us to make decisions. So we acknowledge the situation silently. Then you might choose to come up with a neutral phrase that you use that you know what it means, but the other person might not. Like, oh, thanks for that. Or in the South, I lived in Texas for 17 years, so I feel like I can use this one. We say, oh, bless your heart. Right. So just a phrase that you can say so that you are moving through the adrenaline that just came up as you experience that stress of fat phobia. So you're kind of getting it out there by saying, oh, thanks for that. And then you can play it out later. So in your car, at your house, you can say what you would have said or maybe want to say now. You can write a letter and not mail it. You could type it out, like whatever works, but you can kind of move through that so that you can have some closure around the situation. And again, not responding is always a valid choice. Our choice of whether or not we're going to respond to fat phobia can have so many different things that are contributing to it. It might be our energy that day. It might be the relationship with the person doing it, how many times we've had to deal with it that day or week. And so we might choose to respond differently from day to day, from minute to minute, and all of that is valid. So if you're in a place where you're like, I just don't want to do this today, this is an option to kind of process through it without saying anything out loud or engaging the person.
I had that experience recently. It was shocking to me because I guess I'm used to being in circles that are more fat friendly, but I went to an electrology trade show in Las Vegas, and we know now that I was coming down with the flu, which is why I was off. But a woman did a presentation about PCOS, and I never felt so horrified. And by her fat phobia was just everywhere. And the only thing, like you were talking about different styles, usually I have no problem finding my voice, but the only thing I was able to really blurt out was BMI is bullshit. But the rest of the stuff I wanted to say, I was just, there was no way. And, she even had in her presentation, fat bodies with their heads cut off. But she had one with the head on, and she was like, isn't she brave? And I was like, what is happening? I felt like I was like being punked. It was so bad. So I was like, I'm just going to take notes and write a letter to her and tell her, you have to show us some humanity. Like, she just erased. It was Oh, it was so bad. It couldn't have been worse. Like, I really thought I was being punked. So I had to save it all until I got well. And then I sent her an email and said, that was really awful. You're extremely fat phobic. And I hope you take a second to re-examine your presentation and the words that you use. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for doing that. And I'm sorry that happened. It can be really hard, especially if you're not expecting it, right? And then you're like trying to figure out what to do in that moment. And you don't know if people in the crowd, in the audience, are going to support you, or if they're going to, heap onto you as well. And I think it's important too that we always remember that just because we know more than somebody else doesn't obligate us to educate them, especially when they're actively oppressing us. Right. So what Crystal did was incredibly generous to use your time to write a letter to help educate this poor person. And I'm super grateful for that. And we also can remember that when we're in these situations, we can choose if we want to try to educate someone or not. And if we do, we can realize that we're not responsible for whether or not they take that education. Right. All we can do is provide information. And if they don't accept that, and this goes with like random presenters, your cousin, family and friends, everybody. So if you know there's somebody who this happens with a lot at the holiday season, like every time you go home or go to your friend's house for holiday dinner, a specific person or people do this like fatphobic nonsense, you can start to lay the groundwork for less fatphobia by talking about it ahead of time. So you first would choose hopefully a neutral moment. So a time when this isn't happening. So you're like, hey, can I talk to you about something, or can we set up a Zoom call or whatever? And then you choose a communication method, and you might want to do it face to face. You might want to do it on Zoom. You might want to use text or email. And there's pros and cons to all of it. So face to face is better at conveying tone. Typically. Now, for people who are neurodivergent, this can be very, very different, right? So this all has to also do with like your own personal communication style, your own neurodivergence, all of that. But conveying tone can sometimes be better in person. However, if you're communicating via text, you have more time to really think things out, to craft and recraft, so you can make the decision as to what's going to work best for you. And then you're going to set your boundary. And the important thing to remember about setting the boundaries is you can only typically control your own behavior. So I teach a 3-step boundary setting style. And the first step is you set the boundary, and you can explain it if you want or not. So let's say the boundary is, hey, every time we get together for family dinner, you say something about my weight or my food, and that's just not okay anymore. So I need you to stop doing that. And you can explain all of that, or you can just say, when we get together for family dinner, I need you not to talk about my food or weight. You can also explain it further. I'm working on my relationship with my body and food, and those kind of comments are really harmful. It's up to you how much you want to disclose. And then the second step is consequence. And here you want to focus on your behavior or choices. So, if this happens again, I'm going to go ahead and take my plate into the other room, or go home, or, I won't, I'll simply not respond. And it doesn't have to be big. A lot of people think that in boundary setting, the consequence has to be like something really big and dramatic. And believe me, I am a fan of big and dramatic things, but it's also can be really effective to just do something small. The point is to enforce the boundary, right? To be clear that, no, I was serious about this. So you really want to make sure it's something that you can follow through with. Right. So not like, if you do it, I will never speak to you again, unless that's what you mean, unless you're planning to actually do that, because otherwise you're just kind of teaching the person that your boundaries aren't real, which again, this shouldn't be necessary. It should be simply don't do that anymore. And then they don't. But unfortunately, that doesn't always work. Hence the 3 steps. And you can solicit support from other people about this. You can provide resources, whatever you want to do or not. And then the third step is going to be to follow through. And this is a critical moment, because what will typically happen is the person will blame you. So you'll say, oh, you know what? We talked about this, that it's not okay to talk about my food and my weight. And you did. So now like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and take my plate in the other room. And so it's really common for them to say like, oh, well, you're ruining dinner. Like, no, you're ruining dinner. I asked you for a simple thing to keep from harming me, and you refused, or and you didn't do that. You broke my boundary. You didn't respect that. So I'm going to do what I said I was going to do and just take my plate into the other room. We can try again, next holiday. And so this is sort of a boundary setting. And as with everything I'm going to talk about today, please feel free to make this work for you, for your particular situation, for your relationships, for your communication style, for all of that. So again, example, it's not acceptable to comment on my weight. I'm working on my body image. And though I know you mean well, it's harmful. And again, you can say as much or as little as that as you want. If there's a comment about my weight, I'll move to another room, even if it's during a meal. And then you take your plate and go. And a common question I get is, okay, but what if after I leave, they talk about me? And that may happen. What we're trying to do here is center our experience of harm. So if it is more harmful for you to leave and have people talk about you, then you absolutely don't have to do this, right? This is your choice. What happens is when we get told about what to do with people who are bullying or mistreating us, the advice centers on our bullies, what their reaction might be, how they may sort of, oh, if you use that tone, they'll never listen to you, or, oh, if you ignore them, they'll go away, or if you don't stand up for yourself, they'll never respect you. And all of that advice centers the bully. And I don't want to center the person who's harming you. I want to center you and your feelings. And so you may say, look, I don't care if they talk about me or not. I want to have like a peaceful dinner. And so I'm going to go back home, eat in my car, take the plate to my room, whatever. Or you may say, I don't want to deal with the drama that will happen. So I'm just going to like go through this dinner and deal with, what's happening. And, maybe do that silent process of realizing this is not my fault. It's becoming my problem. And, and thanks for that. Bless your heart. Right. So in specific, when family and friends are food or body policing, again, any response you choose is valid. Responding is not an obligation, and your response can change because of your energy level, how you're feeling, the dynamic, what you are likely to or want to deal with in this interaction. So pandemic specific responses, as people get back together, as it becomes more safe, we're seeing that people's bodies changed, and a lot of people feel the need to comment on that negatively. And so you can just say, look, bodies changing in the middle of a global pandemic and quarantine is perfectly normal. You can say, and this is pandemic or otherwise, I'm uncomfortable with the idea that you're monitoring my body size. Please stop, or at least stop talking to me about it. Or, keep it a little realistic. Instead of body shaming, let's mourn the people whose lives were lost or harmed by the pandemic and be grateful that we're here. Right? Let's put this in a little bit of context here. Gaining weight is by far and away not the worst thing that happened to people during the pandemic.
You survived a pandemic. A lot of people didn't. I think if you don't like it, that's too bad. I lived through it. I survived it. I didn't die from it. And we all know that people thought fat people were dying more of COVID and all that bullshit. But like, I'm here. I survived. That should just freaking be enough.
Yeah. And we're still surviving it, right? This pandemic is not over, and people who are, especially those who are high risk, are still having to, in many ways, quarantine as people take fewer and fewer precautions because they don't feel like they need it for themselves. Right. So there's still like all of these aspects that are going on. And it is really important to like put that in perspective, and for ourselves, and perhaps to help other people put it into perspective. All right. So somebody says some food or body shaming thing to you, like, for example, do you need to eat that? So you can just say with finality, yes, and then eat it, or no, and then eat it. You can answer with a question. Now, understand when we're answering with a question, typically that's going to be a conversation starter. So if you do not want to have a conversation, which would be, again, completely valid, this is not the option for that time. But you can use a tone of pure curiosity, right? Oh, why do you think that's your business? Or, oh, what made you think that I wanted you to police my food intake? Or, I thought you were my aunt. Are you also my dietitian? Right. And again, this can really vary based on your relationship, your culture, all of the factors that make you, you, and that are being brought to bear in this interaction. But having that question can help people come to their own conclusion that, oh, perhaps this is not what I, should have been doing.
It's like when somebody tells a racist joke and you say, I'm sorry, I don't understand. I don't get it. Can you explain it to me? And they have to explain it, and then they really sound like an asshole.
Exactly. And they can kind of find their way to realizing that they have messed up. This doesn't work all the time. Some people will not find their way. Some people will get very, very lost and just double down on, their oppressive behavior, but sometimes this can be helpful. And if it isn't, by the way, then you can use one of these other techniques. So mix and match. You can use these for food, weight, health. So in this left column is like the statement of fact, and then the right column is like the behavioral request. So the first column, that's inappropriate and offensive. What I eat is none of your business. I have absolutely no interest in discussing my weight or health or food choices with you. I find this one to be super helpful because people are not expecting that, right? They're expecting an argument, and they want, especially if they're coming from a really fatphobic place, they just want to like be able to shame you and, all of this. And so when you just say, oh, I have no interest at all in having this discussion with you, it can really shut it down. Or, oh, I'm not soliciting opinions about my food or body or health. And so that's sort of that left-hand column. Then the right-hand column, please don't comment on my food or body choices. You're commenting on it is unacceptable or not acceptable. That's a typo. We can talk about something else, or I can leave, or I can't imagine what made you think that was okay to say. And so you can use these separately, or you can combine them to come up with a pointed response that is clear. What you did is not okay, and here's what I expect moving forward. Cathartic responses. So these you may or may not choose to say out loud. I am the kind of person who will say this out loud. And again, there's a ton of privilege that goes into that, a ton of like neurotypical privilege, a ton of cultural privilege. There's a lot that goes into this. So this might be something you say out loud or in your head. But, yes, I do need to eat this because dealing with your rudeness is depleting my glycogen stores at an alarming rate. Or, if I want to talk to the food police, I'll call Pi 11. I'm sure you're not proud of the inappropriate behavior you've just exhibited. I'm willing to forget this ever happened. And this, again, is a very Southern thing, and I have used it, and it is fun for me because it does make the person uncomfortable because it doesn't give them, it's there. You're just saying like, look, I'm willing to forget this and move on. And if they decide again to engage, then you have all those other options you can use. Oh, thanks for trying to give me your insecurities, but I was really hoping to get an air fryer this year. Or no, I don't need to eat this, but using my fork to eat helps me not stab you with it. So those are the cathartic responses. Practicing these is critical, especially if you're somebody who in stressful situations tends to like go blank or get really stressed or get really emotional, which again, utterly, completely valid responses. But practicing and like trying to get yourself into the state, like really thinking about like, what would it be like to be in this situation and to say this, maybe having someone to partner and role play with can make it really helpful so that when it is like go time and it is happening in real time with this fatphobe in your life, you have practiced this, you've said it a bunch of times, you're ready for it. And that can just help, again, protect you, make the situation go better. And again, remember, you can't control what this fatphobic person does. They may double down, they may become ruder or more hostile. And then you have your other options, right? Walk away, let it go, and we'll talk more about some of those. But practice of these responses can be really, really helpful in these situations. Dealing with passive aggressive fat shaming, right? Oh, a second piece of pie, right? First, as Krista was saying, just acting confused. Sorry, I don't know what you mean. Like, why do you mention it, right? Act like they mean it. This is my favorite way to deal with passive aggressiveness is just act like I don't know what's happening. So like, oh, another piece of pie. Like, yeah, isn't it great how much pie there is? Confront them. Hey, that seems like you're actually trying to food shame me. Am I understanding that right? What's going on? Handle it later. This can be especially important if it's a party situation and the person is super inebriated. You may not want to engage in that conversation, but you might want to talk to them about it later. Gift to charity. So I know people who choose a charity, and then every time someone says something inappropriate or fat shaming, they give like $1 or a dime or however much to that charity. And so you can say, oh, actually, thank you so much. You just made $1 for NAFA. Every time someone says an inappropriate fat shaming thing to me, I'm donating money to them. So I'm sure they really appreciate your contribution. And then silent but deadly, just look at them and don't say anything. And that can create enough discomfort that they just kind of move along. dealing with coworker diet talk. This can be hard again because there's so many different dynamics in the office. If it's common for people to talk about their diets, you can choose to talk about your non-diet practice. Right. Oh, I remember when I used to diet like that too. And then I realized like it, almost everybody loses the weight and gains it back. And there's so much, harm that comes from that weight cycling. So I do, and just talk about your practices just like they talk about theirs. You can also change the subject. I know somebody who memorized a ton of monkey facts. And when diet talk or negative body talk comes up, she just literally says a random fact about monkeys. And I've seen it in action. It is a conversation changer. And it doesn't have to be monkeys. It could be, a local and or college sporting team. It could be knitting. It could be your World of Warcraft raiding party, whatever your thing is that you can just talk about. Just completely changing the subject apropos of nothing can be an option. Setting that boundary. Right. Hey, I'm working on my relationship with food in my body, and this kind of talk makes that really difficult. So I would still love to have lunch with you, but if we can't talk about something else, then I'm going to have to have lunch somewhere else. And then if it becomes a problem where it's, creating a hostile work environment, you can involve HR. And also sometimes it can help to bring up the issue of people with eating disorders. It's not just fat people, though that should be enough. But, also people who deal with eating disorders, when we have this constant kind of diet talk, it can be really harmful to people. And you can consider pitching it as a wellness initiative. Let's have no diet talk December, right? Or some kind of other alliterative thing to get your office behind the idea of not engaging in this kind of talk.
Hey, Merf, do they do this at your work? Is there a lot of diet talk? And
There's a lot of diet talk. And I think that one of the biggest issues I've seen is that people don't want to get into an argument. And so it's how do you have that conversation without making it into, then I have a problem with my coworker on a regular basis and HR does have to get involved. Everyone's really concerned about retaliation. And our organization has never been a retaliatory kind of organization, but I've just noticed every place I've ever worked at, everyone's really scared to, call out somebody's behavior because they're just concerned about getting some sort of retaliation for it.
Yeah, and sometimes going to HR proactively before you have an issue can be helpful because they can create it as an initiative. So it's not like, oh, she said that you are doing this. It's just like we're doing this as a company. You can also, if you're in a place where you are, you have your own sort of chat situation where people chat about just their daily life and send other stuff, you can post resources there. Oh, I just saw this really interesting newsletter about how much weight loss fails, or, oh, I just saw this thing about how Weight Watchers studies are incredibly disingenuous. And you can sort of use those opportunities or your own social media if you're, on social media with your coworkers to kind of have those conversations. You can also, if you have a good relationship, you can sit down with somebody and, have that conversation. You can either come from a place of, hey, I've learned some information about dieting that I wanted to offer you if you're interested in that, with the understanding that they have bodily autonomy. They're allowed to do what they want with their bodies, including, choosing to try weight loss, however unlikely to succeed or dangerous it might be. Or saying look, you can do whatever you want with your body, but this is now harming me and I'm not going to be able to be around you. And I really like you. So I would really like to talk about, is it possible for us to just not do diet talk when we're together?
people
And kind of have that.
people really don't consider others who have an eating disorder or disordered eating, and they don't seem to doesn't even seem to cross their minds at all about it. And I was going to say too earlier, you were talking about neurodivergent and neurotypical. If you're talking to somebody who is neurodivergent, often they just shut down because they can't take the confrontation, so they just stop talking. So sometimes you have to find a different communication style with people who are neurodivergent, I've found.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And that goes back to if you choose to talk face to face, if you choose to use text or email or other methods of communication. So when you've got a coworker or anybody really who's constantly self-fat shaming, right? Oh, I'm so fat. Oh, I was so bad. I ate those cookies. Oh, whatever. You can first try global statements. You can say something like, oh, I wish we lived in a world where everybody could just really appreciate their body and, where we really affirm bodies of all sizes, or whatever makes sense for you to say. You can share your feelings. Oh God, I used to feel that way too. And I don't know about for you, but for me, finding fat activism or fat acceptance or size acceptance community really helped me to like realize how much living in a fat phobic world had affected, my own relationship with my body and food and movement in ways that really didn't serve me. Or again, you can use that boundary setting process. If your workplace is having a weight loss initiative, and these happen all through the year, but certainly more often during the holidays, you can talk to your supervisor, talk to HR, and use arguments like, look, I'm really not comfortable with my boss and coworkers monitoring my body. Right. And if you have an eating disorder history or disordered eating history, which most people who have dieted do, you can talk about that too. This is dangerous and harmful for me and for a lot of other people who, may not want to disclose that they are dealing with an eating disorder, disordered eating. You can say, I'm really uncomfortable that my employer has a point of view at all about how my body looks. And I'm really concerned that this is causing workplace discrimination. We know that fat people get hired less, paid less, and promoted less than thin people do. So this is a real issue. And then I'm concerned about the ways that this might harm people who have or could get eating disorders. You can also communicate with HR. This team weight loss challenge goes against the health plan that I've created with my doctor. That puts me in a position between my health practice and looking like I'm not a team player at work. How would you recommend I navigate this? Or maybe we could do something that's weight neutral so that more people could get involved. Also, look, it's my understanding that studies show the vast majority of people who attempt weight loss gain their weight back, and many gain back more. So could you please provide an evidence basis for the efficacy of this wellness program? And if they're using a specific wellness program, there's a blog called They Said What? The Wellness Industry's Pants Are on Fire. And it's dismgmt.wordpress.com, and it has a lot of resources for specific if your company is contracting with specific wellness programs. But you can communicate with HR and talk about how these are dangerous, and then perhaps offer alternatives. We could do something weight neutral. We could do something that instead of using weight or step count, lets people set their own goals and then achieve them, right? Because these programs are not only fat phobic, but often end up being very ableist. And people shouldn't have to disclose a disability in order to be able to be respected and be seen as a team player at work. And so these company weight loss initiatives are really dangerous and really harmful in a lot of ways. All right, so moving on, this is the time of year, as we said before, that it's just a deluge of diet ads. And I'm kind of amused because after Weight Watchers' whole, now we're WW and we're all about health. I got a postcard from them that said Weight Watchers, and if you're ready to lose weight, we're ready to help. So obviously they realized that co-opting anti-stigma weight neutral language was not selling diets like they needed to. But there's just a ton of diet ads. So first of all, you can come up with a slogan. And this is something that you can use whenever you see something anti-fat or something negative body image or any of that. And I started this practice really early in my journey. And it sounds hokey, and it probably is hokey, but I really focused on every single time I saw a diet message, an anti-fat message, I would think to myself, my personal slogan is, hey, that's bullshit. And so I'd see like freeze your fat off billboard, and I'd be like, hey, that's bullshit. And I really intentionally said it in my head or out loud every single time. And after a period of months, it became really reflexive. And at this point, it's almost automatic. So it's like an exoskeleton that the messages bounce off and they never even get to me. So I don't have to like figure out how to dismantle them, right? I have other friends who use nope, 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 or not today diet scum, but something to remind you, because this, unfortunately, unlearning diet culture is not like, oh, I did it and I'm done. There's so many ways that we can get tripped up. We get a healthcare diagnosis. We, some clothes that used to fit don't. And like we start to think maybe weight loss is the answer. So having this slogan, remembering that, there's almost no chance that weight loss is going to work, and every chance that it's going to harm us, can help keep us centered, even when the diet industry is spending some of their billions of dollars of profits on the best marketers in the world to try to convince us to get back on the diet roller coaster for another ride. Reporting on social media, giving a thumbs down, reporting the ads as misleading or scams. This is one of the great joys of my life. And it helps. It does not help them to give me fewer diet ads. I don't think they claim that it does, but
No,
I've been reporting everyone for years and I still get a ton.
me too.
But
And I
it
love
does
it.
help.
I love reporting them. I love it.
Yep. Yeah, it's just a little bit of joy in my day.
Me too. Do you do it too, Murph? Report them? Yeah. Such
It's like
bullshit.
the perfect amount of petty.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's good
Yeah.
petty. Yeah. I love it.
And it's true. Like this is misleading and a scam. Like
It's
I
a
have
scam.
no problem. I don't feel like I'm being untruthful. That is exactly what it is.
Yep.
So yeah, 100% for that. You can comment. Now, commenting is a double-edged sword on social media because it can get them more attention. But if they're already getting attention anyway, again, I really want to center what makes you feel good about the situation. So I enjoy commenting and saying things like, oh, hey, like, what's your 5-year success rate? Or tell a personal story about, diet failure or giving resources. And there's one critical thing to this, which is that I rarely go back. So my goal isn't to I don't want to have a conversation with the fat phobe. I don't think that, Noom is going to have an honest conversation with me about the absolute lack of efficacy of their program. I think that I want other people who are reading this to have another point of view to look at. And so I go in, I leave the comment, I put resources for people to link to, and then I leave and I just never go back because I don't need that kind of stress in my life. You may choose to sort of engage in that kind of debate, and that might really be something that serves you. And I fully respect that. That's totally valid choice. For me, I want to leave something there so that I did something, I pushed back. Other people who read the thread won't see a thread that's uncritical of, this nonsense. And then I move along. You can also get creative. You can use their ads to make memes or videos or jokes to, again, to help educate, but also to help make you feel better about this nonsense that's coming at you. Because make no mistake, these companies are using fat phobia to make money. So they are both fomenting and profiting from fat phobia. So if you're angry about that, that is valid. That they're using us and they're harming us and they're creating a world that is hostile to us in order to make money. And so I have no qualms about doing whatever I can to help push back against that. And again, donations, you may choose a small amount because there's a lot of them, but just giving, a dime to an organization that works on fat rights or, whatever for every diet ad you see can be both cathartic for you and helpful for that organization. All right. When good friends and family do bad diets. So this is a time when your friends and family are likely to go on diets. They want to talk about the diets. They want to post pictures about the diets. First of all, this is about you. So people are allowed to do what they want with their bodies, but we're allowed to take steps to protect ourselves. And fat phobia creates this double deception. So it says essentially the argument, this deceptive argument, is that we're somehow obligated to support people in their body manipulation attempts. But they aren't obligated to support us or respect our boundaries around our choice not to attempt to manipulate body size. And both of those are bullshit, right? People are allowed to do what they want with their bodies, but I don't have to support that. Just like as a queer person, people are allowed to try conversion therapy, but I don't have to support that, right? And be there for them on that journey. So our choice not to diet, our desire not to hear diet talk, these things are valid and they should be respected, even if somebody is engaged in, weight loss attempts themselves. So ways to handle this, there's the fair is fair. And again, this is where they talk about dieting, you talk about non-dieting. They talk about a benefit of dieting, you talk about how that's achievable without dieting. They celebrate moving out of weight stigma. You talk about how messed up it is that we're expected to change ourselves to suit our oppressors. Right. And make no mistake, when people celebrate, oh, I can finally shop in this store, fit on this roller coaster, what they're saying is, oh, I'm finally not as oppressed as those other fat people are. And that's not actually anti-stigma, right? Changing yourself to suit your oppressors. Again, people are allowed to do whatever they want, but it is when they're celebrating that, when they're celebrating the fact that they've moved themselves out of oppression that other people experience, it's helpful to point that out to them. And if they push back, tell them you expect that you're going to respect and support each other equally, right? If that's what you want to do. And you're not obligated, obviously, to support people in their weight loss journey, but if they're expecting your support, you can expect their support just the same.
When they started talking about diet stuff and their new diet they're on, I was like, oh, I was just going to share with you about my bowel movement from this morning. And then they're like, wait, what? I'm like, oh, you don't want to hear about it? No, I don't want to hear about your diet either. So
yeah, that is always a good one. You can also, at this time of year, use your New Year's resolution wisely. So you can say, oh, my New Year's resolution is to stop being involved in diet talk. It hurts me. It hurts other people. Let's talk about something else. You can start now and be like, oh, and actually, I'm starting early on that. If they push back, again, look, you're welcome to do whatever you want with your body. You're just not welcome to talk to me about it. Right? Let's talk about something else. And again, you can choose how much you want to defend your position. You can choose, and you might be like, look, this person is my friend. I'm just going to listen to this and like deal with it. And that also is a valid choice. It's just important to understand that within a lot of constrictures around privilege and around culture and oppression, we have choices here. You can also give the reasons why you can't support them. You know what? You're allowed to do what you want with your body. I can't support you in this. One, I know that dieting is based on and perpetuates fatphobia. I know it fuels an industry that makes billions of dollars with a product that almost never works and often does harm. I know it can lead to disordered eating and eating disorders. This is just not something that I can support. If they push back, again, you can use some of the other options we've talked about and remember that it's about your behavior only. So at that point, you can say, look, you know, if we can't be friends unless I support your dieting, then it sounds like we can't be friends. Or, you know, I'm just going to, you know, is there any way you could just create a Facebook group for your diet that doesn't include me so that I don't have to see it? You know, you can, depending on the relationship and how important it is to you and what you're willing to deal with, you can sort of try to find some compromise there too. On social media, don't be afraid to block or silence people, right? Because if this may be a friend, and often this diet thing will pass, right? They're going to lose a little weight, then they're going to gain it back, and they're probably not going to talk about it anymore. So you may choose to block them, or you may choose to just mute them for a while. You can ask that they exclude you from the post. You can leave a comment that reflects the realities of the situation. And this is what I do. So if somebody's posting before and after or diet stuff, I'll say, oh, like you look great in both pictures. And even if you're among the vast majority of people who gain their weight back, just know that you're valid and worthy at any size. And I often add, that's exactly what the research said would happen. So just know that's not your fault. People do not typically want to hear this. I have been blocked many a time, and I'm fine with that happening. But I've also had people come back literally, 2 years, 3 years later, unblock me and message me and say, hey, I know I got really mad. I know I blocked you, but I gained the weight back. And I appreciate, that you said that. And that's where I'm coming from. Like, what happens is people lose weight short term. They post about it. They're excited about it. So they're perpetuating fat phobia. They're doing harm. They're also getting a ton of rewards. They're learning that their friends, their family, their coworkers, randos on the internet think they are better when they're thinner. And then they gain the weight back. And all those compliments become insults. And they have to not just feel like they failed at dieting when in fact, in truth, the diet failed them.
It's got to feel so shitty.
I mean, yeah. And that's why people they post before and after, but they don't post after. Like, hey,
yeah.
Today's the day I got back to my original weight.
Right after about people, like if they've had weight loss surgery and they have a dramatic weight loss. And, I always tell my friends, your body, your choice, not a fan. And also I don't compliment people on weight loss, just FYI. Yeah. So they're like, okay, whatever, but I'm like, just be careful, careful about, finding other things to do besides getting your, self-soothing from like alcohol or drugs. Like I know a lot of people who have weight loss surgery kind of can go down that rabbit hole. And I worry, but also when they get all those compliments and then it comes back, I worry, are they going to be okay? Like, holy shit, that's got to be a lot of like, oh, that's got to feel really terrible.
Yeah. And I mean, that is by design. What the diet industry knew very, very early on, like the 40s, that most people lose weight short term and gain it back long term. And what they did brilliantly and are continuing to do is to take credit for the first part of that biological response when people lose weight short term. And then the second part of the biological response, when people's bodies change physiologically in response to weight loss to become essentially maintaining weight regaining machines, the diet industry blames them, gets them to blame themselves, gets other people to blame them for that, the second part of the same biological response, and then go back to the diet industry. So yeah, it's people, I have a lot of compassion. I was there, right? And again, there's privilege in learning about size acceptance. There's privilege in learning about fat activism. There's privilege in learning about weight neutral health. A lot of people don't even know that's an option. And that to me is heartbreaking. And a lot of people have heard about it, but their doctor is telling them, oh, you're going to die before you're 30 if you don't, have your stomach amputated or take these dangerous drugs or go on a starvation diet. And so, most of the work that I do is within the healthcare industry. I do a lot of talks to healthcare practitioners about working with higher weight patients from a weight neutral perspective. And it's really difficult because these are practitioners who also are well-meaning and think they're doing the best thing in a lot of cases, not all cases, but in a lot of cases. And they're misinformed. They're misinforming their patients, and everybody is getting harmed by this. So I have a lot of compassion for that, but also I need to protect myself. And so I have to protect myself and my resources. So there's only so much I'm willing to do or support with someone. Again, for social media, I enjoy making my own before and after pictures or Transformation Tuesday pictures. I actually got kicked out of a triathlon group because I posted Transformation Tuesday, but my transformation was going from diet culture to weight neutral health. And I'm not sure why they did not think that could be tolerated in that space, but they definitely did kick me out of the group. So there can be consequences, but I think that that's really helpful to be like before, after. I'm, new year, same me.
Right.
And you can leave a comment that really reflects the realities of the situation. And I do this with people who know better, like they've been part of weight neutral health community. There was somebody recently who was part of weight neutral health community, had like made her entire business around like selling things to this community, and then started selling this weight loss thing. And so then I was like, wow, it's really a shame to see you perpetuating fat phobia like this.
Yeah.
So that's also another option. It's just to be super honest.
Super honest. Yeah. I think you have to be, you kind of owe it to everybody else if you're not. And it's really disappointing. I know people can do whatever they want with their bodies and their lives and their business, but talk about disheartening and so disappointing. It's just like, oh, stab us all in the heart.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. And it's important to remember privilege. So like if someone has less privilege than me, then that's a different interaction, right? If someone is dealing with not just fat phobia, but also racism and or transphobia and or ableism, and they're trying to escape some of that with weight loss, that to me doesn't feel like my place to comment on.
Yeah.
And so I will keep that to myself. The interactions really depend. And that's a place where I think understanding our own privilege is important.
Yeah.
And whether or not it's our place to come for somebody. You can also leave a blog or informational article. And again, this is one of those things where you might choose to go back, you might not, but just, hey, as you're going on this journey, I thought that it might be helpful for you to have this information. And a lot of what I'm trying to do is inoculate people, right? Even if they block me, they never come back. I just want one person to have told them, this is probably not going to work and you are valid and worthy at any size. I want there to have been one message of that in amongst all of the, you look so much better. Oh my gosh, you look so amazing. Who knew you could look this good? And all of these comments that end up, again, becoming insults once the weight is regained. So with celebrities might not be our friends, but they can feel like our friends. And it can feel like a real betrayal when especially if they've been on the, weight neutral health or size acceptance or quote unquote body positivity train. So when this happens, first of all, it's helpful to evaluate their true stance. We have so few role models who are truly fat liberationists, who are truly coming from weight neutral health perspective, that sometimes we can assume people are or want them to be when they never really were. Right. A lot of people are doing this body positivity and so originally body positivity was meant to be a radical fat liberation perspective, but it's really been co-opted by kind of chunky white women. I want chunky white women to love themselves. I just don't think they need to be the first in line. And beyond that, they are tending to then push out the people who it was meant for. So you'll see a lot of these quote unquote body positive influencers who will say it's fine to be fat as long as you're healthy or as long as you're have a certain amount of mobility or whatever. And so they've got a lot of like healthism and ableism and racism like mixed into their quote unquote body positivity. And so a lot of celebrities can be in that place too, or they'll go back and forth. I remember writing about Drew Barrymore's latest weight loss attempts. So she is somebody who fluctuates, her weight fluctuates. And I have so much compassion for that because that's exactly what's going to happen. And she's in an industry where there's like her body is under a microscope and where, you know, she's really dealing with a lot of pressure. But when she's at the higher end of her weight, she's all like, I'm body positive and I, you know, this is just me. And, but then when she's at the lower end of her weight, she really like pours on the fat phobia. And so that's a real problem. And evaluating that can help us not to get fooled the next time that her weight is up. And she's not the only one. She's just who comes to mind. Understand your feelings are valid. If you're feeling like you're betrayed, if you're feeling you're being used by celebrities who are all about body positivity and using us as a fan base, but then when they lose weight, all of a sudden, you know, they're just as fat phobic as everybody else. Again, privilege comes into play here. So think about that when you're choosing who to criticize and what to talk about. And then, you know, a lot of times you can feel gaslit because we are being gaslit. So like, do their actions actually match who they're claiming to be? And evaluating that again can help us to not get fooled by celebrities who are using body positivity when it's convenient for them, but then completely abandoning any kind of fat positive or size acceptance principles when they lose weight. So reaction options, you can disassociate and you can do that out loud, right? This is, you know, I can't support this. I think you're doing a lot of harm. Non-association, you can just like back away and not talk about it. You can wait it out and see, because once they lose weight, they're probably going to gain it back. And then you can decide to see like, how are you going to, you know, how are they going to respond and what do you want to do? Or you can call it out, right? Hey, what happened to your principles? You know, it's, you know, one thing, your body is your own, but these decisions to try to lose weight don't happen in a vacuum. And the way that people behave, even while they're short-term successful at weight loss, that matters. They don't have to do fat phobic things. They can say, you know, I don't comment on my body, or I was fine at any size, or, you know, there's a lot of ways that people could still enact some, good principles and still avoid fat phobia, even if they're involved in intentional weight loss. And so their choice, not just to engage in intentional weight loss, but to also embrace fat phobia as part of that, that choice matters and they're responsible for that choice. All right, family and friends. With family and friends, some things to maybe consider is your relationship and power dynamic. I used to in college, I came out as queer in Texas in the mid-90s, and I did a lot of mentoring. And we spent a lot of time mentoring students not to come out at the holidays, right? Because they were dependent on their families for their education, for, you know, their ability to eat and have clothing and shelter. And we were like, look, you really maybe want to think about being in a more powerful position before you make this choice to come out. And obviously, you can do whatever you want, but understanding that can be really helpful. Thinking about the possible consequences and perhaps taking intent into account. Now, impact is greater than intent. You know, that's a really common thing that we hear, and that's true. But for me, I think intent matters. I think someone who accidentally steps on my foot, and then when I say, ow, gets off my foot, I think that's different than someone who purposefully steps on my foot. And then when I say, ouch, please get off, they say, I don't understand. Why? Why can't I stand on your foot? What's the problem? Why is it hurting? Right? Those are two different interactions to me. So if you have a well-meaning family member who's doing things that are fat phobic, that might make a difference to you, or it might not, and either of those is valid. If you're trying to keep a relationship but lose diet talk, one option is just to like get out of the conversation as fast as possible. Wander off, change the subject, make one of those global comments.
Yeah, this is where I got a little bit tripped up, and I still do. I adore my in-laws, and we're not super close, but when I'm there for different holiday meals and stuff, they'll talk about, oh, so such and such Margaret, you know, the really, really fat one at the show, at the home. And you know, I'm like, oh, did she say that? And they're just, you know, like, I'm like, hello, I'm here. I hear what you're saying about fat people. I'm fat. And they don't even think about it. And I don't think they're not trying to be mean to me, or it's just how they describe other people. It's like when people say, they're telling the story, and they're like, and that person was Indian, and I'm like, what does that have to do with this story? Like, why did we have to know their ethnicity? It's just like with these people, why do we have to know their body size for you to tell us a story about the people at the home? And it's just like, what do I just didn't say anything. I just clammed up. I'm like, oh, I don't want that to happen this year though.
Yeah, so that's a tough one. And so some options are to point it out gently. So be like, oh, like she's like my size, right? Is that right? Because sometimes people who are fat phobic, who want to be in relationships and like in family and friends with fat people, simply try not to think of us as fat. Right. So they're not engaging with the fact that their fat phobia affects us. They're putting us on like an exception list where we're not like, quote unquote, those other fat people. And so helping them to understand that that's happening can be really helpful.
Totally.
You can also at the end of the story say, oh, I remember you mentioned she's really fat, but I'm not sure like what that had to do with anything. Was there like something about that?
Right.
And sort of bring that up and talk
Yeah.
about it. Or just react really positively. Oh yeah, she is fabulously fat. She's goals, for when I'm in a home, right? So reframing that conversation a little bit can also be helpful.
That's a good
And
one.
yeah, I think sometimes it can be helpful to create a little discomfort, not enough that they're going to say anything, but enough that like maybe they'll rethink what they're doing. Sometimes my activism is about creating a lot of discomfort, so much that I hope that what happens is this person is so uncomfortable in this conversation that they will never want it to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of one of the ways that I use my privilege, but not typically with family and friends. With family and friends, I typically am going to be more subtle about it and try to help them like come to the conclusion on their own that what they're doing is fat phobic and dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. I have a feeling it might be a little bit different since we missed 2 years because of the pandemic. And this was to be our first year getting back together for the holidays in person. And some of them have friended me on Facebook. So I know they see my fat politics. And so I'm hoping that's enough. And they've already got figured out, okay, we need to stop talking about this, at least in front of Crystal. But I would love for them to stop talking about it at all.
Yeah. And this is like this podcast and other folks stuff. Shelby at Fit Flexible Fluid on Instagram does incredible work. Shelby Gordon around like family and friends and respect during the holidays, but posting this stuff to your social media feed in advance of the holidays can be really helpful to sort of soften that ground.
I had once at work, we did a donuts and coffee thing where people could come in and buy donuts and coffee and contribute to the morale committee. And this lady came in, and she's well known, as one of the people that makes a lot of comments. And she said, oh, I'll just have the coffee. I'm not going to eat the donuts. I'm trying to lose weight. And I said, yeah, if you keep messing around, you're going to end up looking as good as me. And I like rubbed my belly, and she didn't know what to say. And everybody else in that room just kind of stopped. And it was just subtle enough, but it was also kind of like, I look good, so why are you saying this? And that really, she didn't know what to do. And it was a great way to just kind of stop the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And like that little bit of humor and the little bit of like, take a look at what you're doing. I think it's kind of similar when people say, oh, I feel so fat. And I'm like, I am so fat. So like, ask me anything. I got information. But yeah, pointing that out, I think that's so perfect, that interaction. And yeah, it's a lot of times people just aren't thinking. Again, we're, like that old Palmolive commercial where they're like, it's a person with their hand in dish soap. And they're like, Palmolive, you're soaking in it, right? Like we are soaking in it. We are living in a culture with so much fat phobia that diet talk, negative body talk, these things are considered normal. They're considered in some cases like obligations, right? You're not supposed to just eat a donut. You're supposed to either say how bad you're being only take half the donut, talk about how much exercise you're going to have to do. And these are all really disordered relationships with eating, but that's what our culture demands.
I'm like, go ahead and eat half. I'll come around later and get the other half. No problem.
Right.
Yeah, it's so silly. Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because we're just like the fish swimming in the sea of fat phobia, and it's everywhere. We can't escape it. And there's a zillion messages. And that's why I try to give my family and friends a little bit of okay, I get it. We're getting all these messages all the time, but like, it's enough already. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep this up. And every time, even my mom just told me recently, she stopped dieting at like 74. You know why? She just realized every time she goes on a diet, she loses the weight but gains it back plus some.
Yeah.
Like, you're just realizing that now, Mom?
I mean, it's really hard. And we live, I gave a workshop recently and one of the participants was really upset and was like, are you saying that all these organizations that say that weight loss is possible are wrong? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. But at some point you start to sound like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, because it is in many real ways a conspiracy what the diet industry has done and continues to do. And so our families are all subject to that, which is why, like, to your point, Crystal, we can kind of decide like, okay, I'm going to let this person talk about their own diet, but if they start talking about my food, that's when I draw the line. Or we can decide, nope, I'm not going to participate in their diet talk around themselves. Like, we can kind of make those decisions based on, again, how important is this relationship to me? I cannot be in a partnership with someone who is going to engage in diet culture. That's just me. That's not everybody. Some people are like, nope, like, this person, I want them to be who they want to be. And if this is what they want, then I'm going to support them. That's also totally valid in your choice. It's just something to really understand, especially, and I bring up weight loss surgery because rather than having informed consent conversations about weight loss surgeries, doctors tend to market and sell them like they're like some LuLaRoe leggings. And so people just don't have a clear picture of what the outcomes can and are likely to be. And I think that's really important. So at any rate, if it's your partner, like, try also to get some support outside of that relationship, especially if they're your main support, because you may need support as they go through this, as they, even if they're losing weight short-term and gaining it back long-term, that can change the dynamic of your relationship. It can change how they feel about themselves. They can really start to, like we talked about, engage in fatphobic things, right? Where they're talking about before and afters and celebrating, at least temporarily, escaping fat oppression that you are still subjected to. There's a lot of dynamics there. So try to get some support around that. Understand it's really difficult and that you deserve to be safe in your relationship. When they try to make it about you. So if someone asks you, hey, have you lost weight? You can be just non-committal. Oh, I don't know, or I don't weigh myself, or who cares? And sometimes this can be asked passive aggressively, which is like super extra shitty, right? So these still apply. You can do a little bit of activism. Yeah, I'm actually not comfortable with you monitoring my body, so please don't. Or I used to ask people that too, until I learned it can be really harmful for people who lost weight in response to illness or grief or an eating disorder. Or you can ask that question, hey, help me understand why that's your business. But again, you don't have to let people make this about you. If they're saying, oh, I did this diet and I lost this weight and you should try it. Quick answer, no thanks. Explanation answer, some version of, oh, I've been there, I've done that, I've read the research, like I know better.
Nope.
Nope. You can also use an activism answer. So you can say, it can actually be harmful to suggest that people try to lose weight. If you want to know more, I'm very happy to send you some research. So you can, engage these conversations to whatever extent you feel like you want to in any given situation. You can ask a question like, why? When they say you should try it, right? Why? Oh, do you think I'm too fat? Did I accidentally hire you to be my dietitian or personal trainer? That one, I've had a lot of fun with that. Like when people suggest, oh, I did this diet, you should try it. Like, why? Well, to lose weight. What weight? Are you saying you think there's something wrong with my body? And you're like saying it out loud to me like this, like that seems okay to you? Creating that level of discomfort. Again, this is one of those situations where often I want them to not do this to other people. So I want to make this as uncomfortable a moment for them as I possibly can, so that the next time they think about saying it, they think about our interaction. How and when to tell people about weight neutral health. So things to consider: 1, the type of relationship you have and the power structure. 2, the outcome that you're hoping for. Again, we can lead people to water, but we cannot make them drink. So we can give them information, but what we don't want to do is feel like if they don't take or accept or learn that information, that we have somehow failed. And whatever outcome you're hoping for, like, okay, what happens if you don't get that outcome? And what are you willing to lose? Sometimes these conversations can become really, really fraught and can end up in a situation where you lose the relationship or you don't speak for a while or ever. And so you can make those decisions for yourself. in the wild, when just fat phobia comes out of nowhere, global statements can be really helpful. Oh, I wish we lived in a world where we just, appreciated that all bodies are good bodies. Share your feelings and those facts. I used to think that too. And then I learned blah, blah, set that boundary. And then finally, just snarky AF responses. And again, these may be something you say in your head. They may be something you say out loud, just depending on your personality and the situation. Like, oh, geez, please tell me that trying to manipulate your body size isn't the most interesting thing you have to talk about. Right? This is going to be a long lunch. Losing weight, huh? My New Year's resolution is to learn to levitate. So we've basically got the same chance of success. If I have to hear about your diet, I'm going to tell you about my bowel movements in vivid detail with pictures. Or we could talk about something else. Totally your call.
There you go.
So there we go. Back to Crystal's idea.
Right. Yeah. I think
Lauren would be quite weird for that one.
yes. I think it's a good idea for people. And when people have asked me, how have you been prepared to respond to people, fat shaming in the wild? I just have them ready. Like I have one or two that are always just ready, just in case, like fight or flight, right? I have it. And sometimes it's just fuck you. And other times it's like, I'll say, did you just call me fat? Like really loud. And that's what everybody turns. And I think it helps to, when you go out the door, just be like, just in case today I have this one and this one ready, so that you maybe feel more empowered when it does happen. If it happens, I hope it doesn't happen. But I mean, as much as it's happened to me, I'm assuming it happens to a lot of people out in the wild.
Totally. And like what I want for, to give people is the opportunity to walk away from that interaction feeling okay about themselves. Right. So if that means, so sometimes, people will say, well, if you just say like, fuck you and walk away, like, what have you done? Like, I've made myself feel better and that's enough. Right. I'm not responsible for this person's education. I'm not responsible for coddling them through their fat phobia. If I choose to educate them, that's a courtesy I'm doing to that for them. Right. It's when someone says something fat phobic, I'm allowed to say, yeah, fuck you and walk away. And that's a totally valid choice.
100%.
And so, yeah, so I think that's really important what you're saying, Crystal, that, you get to choose and you get to decide, I want to prioritize me walking away feeling better about this interaction. And the best way for me to do that is tell this person to fuck off.
Merf, do you ever get fat shamed in the wild?
All the time.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It's usually, at like a restaurant or at the mall, like in just general public kind of thing. Sometimes it's meant to be as a bullying kind of situation, and sometimes it's just blatant ignorance.
Have you found for the most part that it's men that fat shame you?
Actually, no, I find more that it's women.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've had a lot
Men
of
will say like they're the kind of ones like I've been screamed at from outside of a car, like while I'm on the outside and they're on the inside driving by or that kind of thing. Like guys are usually very blatant with it, where women are much more that kind of subtle Catan, get you in the back kind of thing.
Yeah.
that are dealt with.
Yeah. Okay. I was wondering. And so do you have, are you prepared to say something immediately back? Do you have like a quick response usually?
Yeah. And I think it's exactly what Ragen said. You have to practice.
Yeah.
You just have to practice it over and over again and be ready to go.
Yep. Yeah. I don't like to let them get away with any bullshit. So I have to say something to everybody. And like I said, sometimes it's just fuck you. And other times, yeah, it's more than that. But did you just call me fat is one of my favorite, because everybody else, I say it very loudly, everybody looks at that person. And usually that person, usually it's for me, it's been men, they just scurry away like a little cockroach. So I'm like, I love it.
I like to come sometimes with pity too. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that this is what your life has become. Like, I hope that things get better for you. Often like if I'm in an interaction, because most of the fat shaming that I experience like in the wild is when I'm out like working out. And people just are really like pressed that somebody fat thinks they have a right to like public spaces, to be in those spaces and be working out, not to lose weight or whatever. And so I found that one to be really helpful. Just like, oh my God, they say something fat shaming and I just say, oh my God, I'm so sorry that this is what you've become. Like, wow, that must be hard.
I swear to you, fat people, if you work out, you get shit. If you don't work out, you get shit.
Yeah. And just to be so this is always my thing. Fitness is not an obligation. It's not a barometer of worthiness. It's not entirely within our control. I've done both. I can tell you for sure that completing a marathon and having a Netflix marathon are morally equivalent activities. So I just want to be really clear, because that whole good fatty, bad fatty dichotomy thing, I get privileged by that. So I want to help kill it. But yeah, there's, it's the whole thing, right? Like they don't make workout clothes in plus sizes, but they want you to work out, I guess, like in a toga fashioned from a bedsheet. I don't know what they're thinking, but there's a lot there. But I find in like fitness fat shaming, just, being clear that like I have every right to be here, and your behavior is so out of control and inappropriate that I imagine something must have gone terrible in your life, but like whatever it is, I hope you fix it.
I feel sad that people can't see beauty in every human. But I just want to say too, just to kind of come clean, like about 10 years ago, I was still perpetuating the good fatty, bad fatty thing. Like, yeah, I'm fat, but I'm healthy. And then thanks to people like you and all the other people in our community, I learned that it's very ableist, first of all. And it comes from a place of a lot of privilege, and that doesn't just no, Crystal, no. I had to learn that from our community. That's, yeah, you can't, there's no good fatty, bad fatty. That's terrible. Okay.
Okie dokie. I will move through just a few more. Yeah. So we're done. So we can do a Q&A with us, or we can chat, but that's my information for those who are watching. And I will stop sharing so I can see all of your lovely faces.
I do have a question. So, I mean, everything that you went over, and thank you, extremely informative and so helpful. As a therapist, I will be using some of your scripting on a regular basis. I think I already have from a couple of your past presentations that I've been a part of. But how do you take care of yourself? We as activists and the work that you do and the consulting and all those kind of things that you're doing with healthcare professionals, like how do you take care of yourself after trying to really get this through to people?
There's a ton of privilege in it. It's one of the reasons that I decided to do this full time, is because by whatever like luck of the draw, personality and privilege stuff I have, it doesn't seem to impact me the way that it does other folks, which is again, just lucky. I also have an incredible support system. My partner, who's Julia Motasic, is a super fat disabled activist. And so having her support, like that, I can always be like, this happened. And she's like, that is bullshit. Like it's never pushback. Like, oh, are you sure that was fat shaming or what? Like, I am incredibly lucky in that way. My mom is also super supportive, and she's really worked hard to understand what I do. She reads everything I write. She listens to every interview. She'll listen to this. Hi, Mom. And has always in my whole life been just unbelievably supportive, even if she wasn't fully understanding where I was coming from. Awesome. And so like having that support, again, tons of privilege and luck in that. And then I always I keep reminding myself, one, this is not my fault. It's become my problem. And two, I cannot take responsibility for the outcome of the work that I do. Mm-hmm. All I can do is do the work to the absolute best of my ability, constantly learn, constantly get better, constantly critique myself and interrogate myself for ways that I am having like biases and I'm not doing my work intersectionally. That's my job. Yep. And then put out the work. Mm-hmm. And then I just cannot take responsibility, which is really hard for me to do, right? I have a lot of perfectionism, which you would not know from my writing because I'm like the typo queen. That's something that I just had to like get over in my early days of blogging. Like this is just what's happening. But I really like focus on, I just want to put the work out there to the best of my ability and hope that, people find it and it helps them.
I think people are into authenticity, not perfection anymore. So I don't think you have to worry about typos and that kind of shit anymore. It's if people are worried about that, they're focusing on the wrong thing. Hey, Merf, do you feel like you have family members that might fat shame you in the holidays or any kind of family event?
Not immediate family, but definitely extended family. Like I used to have that issue a lot with my grandmother. She would be really, really fatphobic and mean,
My grandma too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I've been around it, but definitely not something that I have to deal with now. I've kind of stopped all the extended family member holiday kind of things from
Good.
happening. And I'm just like, nah, I'll handle the core people. And they all know that if they went there with me, it would be really, really
I notice my family has this thing about acknowledging people, like if they think there's weight loss or weight gain, and they'll either directly to the person, they'll say something like, "You look like you've lost a few pounds," and I'm like, "Really? That's just my life's work to get people out of this fucking mindset." And I go, "You don't know." And also, what if you say that to somebody and they're sick and that's why they've lost weight? Like, aren't you gonna feel like a big asshole? But anyway, it's like a family thing. They love to comment when they see you coming or going. "Oh, you look great. Have you been dieting?" And I go, "You're asking me that fucking question?" "No, I haven't been dieting. Do you know anything about me? Like, really?" But yeah, they're stuck on that. How they think you look better, I guess, if you've lost a few pounds. And they just have to
It's
always say it's bleh.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's super weird, I think. And sometimes I think it's helpful to point out, like, it's so weird how we think it's okay to monitor and comment on each other's bodies.
It's weird.
Like, that's a weird thing that I think our culture needs to stop. I also, sometimes if I feel like I can't say anything, like it's, I'm at this is years ago, but like I would be at my friend's grandma's house and she'd be super fat phobic. And I just did not feel like I would just think to myself, like, how sad that she's still stuck in fat phobia.
Yeah.
Like, that's really rough. I remember being in fat phobia and looking back, it sucked pretty bad. And so that would help me. Like, I think of it as compassion. Sometimes I move toward a more like petty pity around it. Like, oh, poor angel. But like, I do have a lot of compassion and it does help me get through those situations. Like, oh, I'm so sorry that this person is still stuck in this paradigm.
Yeah.
bless your heart.
Bless your heart. Bless your pointy little head.
I was going to say, in my family, we say, "Bless your pointy little head."
Yep.
That's from Texas, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, hi, Reagan's mom.
Yeah.
She'll say hi to you too.
Oh, cool. Merf, do you have any other questions for Reagan, or any questions or anything to add about this topic, or anything you could think that might be helpful?
No, I just want to thank you for your time and your
Good stuff.
expertise. It's so appreciated. And I know that our folks, this is like the number one thing that I get asked in regards to like, "Hey, you're a therapist. Like, how do I deal with my family member?" And I'm like, it really depends on the context and what's happening and what's your relationship. And you covered all of that just so eloquently. So thank you.
Agreed.
Oh, thank you both for all the work you do individually and with this podcast. And
Yeah.
I'm just so thrilled to get to be a little part of it. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reagan. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say it one more time because I might have gotten it wrong earlier. But to find your website and your Substack /newsletter, weightandhealthcare.com. Is that right?
Yes. Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, no problem.
Yes, that's right.
Weightandhealthcare.com is the best place. And I know you're all over all the socials. You're really easy to find. I know. It's just impossible not to find you. Thankfully, I'm so grateful that your messaging is out there. And like I said, your Substack and your newsletter is very, very helpful. There was one I got involved on where you were asking for comments. And I was saying that when doctors prescribe weight loss to me, I say, "Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. I need to know which diet though." And they're like, "Okay." And I go, like ones that have like proof that they work and that people keep like more than 10 pounds off, more than 18 months to 2 years. They're like, "Okay, sure. I'll take care of it." I go, me too. I'll go on that diet right away. And I never get anything from them ever because there's no such thing. And, it's hilarious to push back that way to me because I'm like, "Oh, for sure. And then I'm like, "Okay, but you tell me which diet to go on." And then they get like, they're stunned because they can't think of one. "Have you tried Weight Watchers?" "Yeah, I tried about 7 times a long time ago." Like I haven't done it. I haven't been on a diet in 20 years, but yeah, most people say, "Oh, I love Weight Watchers. I've done it 16 times. It works
And
great."
it worked
like,
every time. Like,
I go,
wait, no.
It didn't work, right? Because you're doing it again. It's confusing.
That one kills me. Yeah.
It's the greatest trick of it's the greatest magic trick of the diet culture is that
Yeah.
you're the failure, not the diet.
People
So,
get
yeah.
mad at me when I say shitty things about Weight Watchers. They're like, they'll come into my private message. God damn it, Crystal! I've done this diet so many times. I wish you stopped talking shit about it. It works really great. And I'm like, no, it doesn't, because you keep doing it, and they keep taking money from you. Don't you feel like an idiot? And they don't respond.
I've had people come after talks that I give, like come down to talk to me, stand in line, and then be like, you shouldn't talk bad about Weight Watchers. I've done it 6 times and it worked every time. And they're fat. And like, I don't want to make this person feel terrible, but I'm like, we have a different definition of work, you and I. If I paid someone 6 times and it still didn't get it done, like I'm certainly not going to rush down and stand in line to challenge a professional speaker about it. Like that's not like, not only, and I think that people have to have that, because otherwise, what are they doing?
Yep.
Right. And again, the diet industry has done a brilliant job of this.
Yeah.
This is an absolute manipulation, long game that they've been playing brilliantly. It's not accidental that people are caught in this roller coaster, but it's hard sometimes to think, like, I just kind of slow blink. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
like, I need you to think about what you just said. Like,
yes, please.
Work it out.
It's great. It's really intense. It's really, really intense. And it is a great trick that they've done, which is to teach us that we all failed because we didn't try hard enough, and then they get our money again. So yeah, there's a reason why Oprah decided to invest in it. And if it was easy to be thin, don't you think that Oprah would stay thin if it was easy to stay thin? But even she can't do it, and she has all the resources available to her in the whole wide world. So it doesn't work, people. But anyway, Ragen, thank you. It was all awesome, and honor. We love having you. I love all of your stuff, and I appreciate all that you do. I know you do. I know you do so much more than most of us even know. And I get your newsletter, and I know how many emails you have to, or that you do respond to in a month. And it's mind blowing how much you do. I don't know how you get so much done. You must not sleep very much.
I'm not a big fan of sleep, and I'm not very good at it. So it works out for me.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, because you cover a lot of ground in a day. That's for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Is there anything else we need to remind everybody? Just remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for being a part of our community. I'm going to say
the Liberator stuff.
What's that?
Are we still giving away the Liberator stuff?
Oh yeah, that's tomorrow. The drawing's tomorrow. And yeah, they can just go to our website, BigSexyChat.com, and enter into we have 2 sex blankets to give away from Liberator. Thanks for reminding me, Merf.
No problem.
All right. Thanks, y'all. See you later, alligator.
After a while, crocodile.
See you soon, raccoon.
Thanks.